I'm gonna go ahead and put the camera on you and turn these lights on, and we can get
Yeah,
the
sure,
lights
and we'll
the way you
dim
want them.
I'll dim the other guys, yeah.
And your mic is on here, just so you know.
Okay, sure. I do a lot of TV, so you're not going to freak me out with the lights.
Yeah, no, it's not too comfortable, unfortunately.
Let's do the light source.
Do you think he will stand or be seated?
Stand.
Okay.
It's an energy thing. What'd your movie cost?
You know, we,
There's never one answer to that question, is there? I mean, did somebody fund it, I guess is what I'm asking.
yeah, that's serious work. But fun if we can get it, so.
Yeah, right.
See you later.
Yeah.
So this is all,
I'm good, as long as you're good. Yeah, the lighting looks okay to you?
it looks okay to me, but.
Well, you're the audience.
You know, you might know better.
No, right now you're the audience. As long as the images up there look good.
Yeah, I think it does look good.
Hi, it's Tom. Hello.
señora Erika Prado.
Is that too bright for you?
Nope, I'm good.
Is yours?
Paul was just in here, set everything up the way.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, okay, cool. No, I'm fine.
Good. Okay.
Oh, good. Hi there.
Hello, how are you?
Figured out who's who in the zoo?
Set this off to the side. I guess when you're done with your speech, if you could just like take your name tent with you.
Yeah.
Just move it because I'm not sure.
There's nothing in here after us. Oh, yeah, there is. There's, I think there might be one.
No, I think this is the last
Yeah.
panel in here.
Okay.
It'll
So-
just be the other speaker, Stephanie.
Yeah, Stephanie.
Are you going first or is she?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm sort of assuming maybe I am because I'm set up,
Yeah,
which would be kind
whichever
of.
way, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
I mean, it's up to Gabe.
Either way works.
Okay.
I'll just set that right there for her.
you do have a.
I don't need it.
Okay, it's your choice. You can easily make it happen.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a?
Well, you know what, I don't have a copy of it.
Um,
I'm fine.
Are you Tom? Are you Tom? I don't know if that's Tom's laptop or if that's a hotel laptop.
I'm neither a doctor nor do I play one on TV.
Penn State.
I'm happy to really, I don't have slides and not necessarily anyone I was doing like my work. So,
Just go with it.
yeah, that's fine with me. Great.
And I think that this is going to be streamed from the internet, audio. I don't know, maybe both. Is this being video streamed?
Yes.
Online? Okay. So, there's water.
Great.
Anything else you
Yeah,
need?
I'm gonna use that. Sure.
Okay. It sounds like maybe that.
Well, good, an audience of one.
Okay, so I'm sure that the one down in the main room, yeah, it finished late, so we're just starting to move around.
I'm sorry.
John Rutherford, hi. Probably not for any good reason. You know, I'm just a interested private citizen. People almost always say, "So, who are you affiliated with?" I'm
Yeah.
like, nobody.
Nobody.
Just me
What's
learning
your
about
name?
stuff.
What's your name? Hi, Gabe.
Hey, let's go.
Is this how you wanted the lights for the video, or is somebody else for the lights?
Yeah, I set them up this way because otherwise this thing washed out.
Stephanie's going to go first, so we'll
Okay.
turn the lights on and then we
Sure,
can pop right
sure.
back
I'll
out.
just run back like this. Is she using a here?
No.
Perfect. Just took a half an hour to get this thing set up.
That's what the sound then.
Look forward to your talk. This session closed.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I heard you do the book section. Yeah, I'm dying here, so. It's precision to discuss.
How you doing? See anything past the sessions? The one in there?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Good.
that's terrific. I mean, I've been a few that have just been just perfect, like, sessions.
Sam's holding it should stay in there. Right.
Bedrooms. Oh, yeah, Tom.
That's my good connection.
Fun to be your Stephanie?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tom Keenan.
Hey, nice to meet you.
You're up first,
Yes.
and they tell me you don't have any EV or anything, so we'll
Yeah.
just benefit from your wisdom.
And so, Stephanie, you'll have 30 minutes
Great.
total, including Q&A. Since the session just let out, hopefully you're not.
No, I
You
can.
have another 5 minutes to wait.
Yeah.
Time's
that's
okay?
fine.
Okay.
So I'm from the University of Calgary.
Yeah. Oh, wow. My uncle lives in Calgary.
And I just said, she's from Calgary. So, yeah, but I'm from the Bronx. So, you know,
Cold up
and
there.
where do you live?
I am at White House in DC. So, yeah, it's very close.
Yeah, yeah.
No trouble at all.
Yeah, actually Gabe told me he was in the summer, got quite excited because I'm writing, I wrote a book on what makes technology creepy, and I'm writing a book on what makes biology creepy.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So this is Chris from Londell. So can you stay in touch with you, or you can make it with the card?
Absolutely. You know, I don't have any cards, so we just started, but yeah.
Please.
No. Well, you'll be very interested then because we're combining technology with biology.
Yeah.
So that'll be like creepy spread.
I'm enjoying this in the 12-year-old biohacker, so there's synthetic biology in the basement. So it's kind of it's just like when the Apple II came out, people went into the race when they know the two things are what they're supposed to do. These guys, as soon as guys are getting machines that universities are selling off depending on the dollar. So I don't know if you need sequencing, if you need synthesis.
There's a nurture coming.
Oh, that's totally good.
Yeah.
I stole a swag bag from
This is
one
blocking the
Oh,
camera
sure.
angle. No, we don't do that. Yeah, no, I do a lot of, tweaking is kind of the area I work in. I took the first computer security course in 1974 in Canada. So I've been doing a lot of security stuff, cryptography, and mathematician work.
That's good. You know, we've been focusing quite a bit on security, trying to figure out like what's the best framework for security for data sets research. And we have a roundtable coming up with Joe Mention's crew next week, and we are looking for recommendations from external experts.
I want to be very interested in helping with Canada's privacy commission. There's a federal body of information. So you can just take a look at the federal government. You know, we're a provincial commission, but then there's a federal one. And that's where we have 5 highly standards of information. So it's kind of fun.
Well, I guess it was actually the second staff conference that I did. It was in San Diego. You were oh no, this time. Okay, yeah. But I was in Walmart, that place in San Diego, and one of the birds from Walmart walks by. He's like, context like confusion. I can't. Sure enough, this actually he's got a conference. We just moved to biomedical startup. This was the
Brought to you by Dr. Future.
Sorry?
Brought to you by Dr. Future.
Oh, I
Okay, good.
all right, that's good. Wow, that's.
Gee, why didn't I think of that?
That's awesome.
When you have time, or when you still want to make conference now,
Absolutely.
you can keep the list.
Please.
Tell you
Thank you.
now, or then you have a few minutes down, no, you don't have
We're
conference.
getting started pretty soon, but yeah, but no, that's amazing. Thank you.
Just ask what it is to.
Yeah, I mean, I know them all. They probably read me. She's a big year for. She doesn't have size. Yeah, I've read all of them. I went out of it. It's been, I don't know. Thank you. This is excellent. Thank you. Sure. No, you don't. I just make sure. Yeah. I've read those, yeah.
These are magic mysteries. You know your soul is a few times I can't get in the series. So I'm sure you know. So it's kind of a bunch of series. The first series, Jennifer, they trust archive. That's it. There's like 4 times, right? Second series is the magic book. It's the first one. 34 is a stand. 34 is Savage children, Neptune's wings, and other ones. Scouts of the Bible, Turtles, and your evening will be great. Crazy more about it. Campaign was a big one.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You did this from memory?
No, from my bookshelf.
Oh, okay.
These things. This was a book like that, so it's like the shelves. That's the short. Enjoy. I ran away from it. No, there's lots of other.
Thanks a lot.
I'm doing this for all my stuff.
No, I really appreciate it. You can go.
Stephanie, okay if I take one? Since we're on the air anyway, you know it's being live streamed.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Is it okay? Just like to ask before I do it.
I didn't know you were going to be here, so does that bother you?
No.
Okay. All right.
All right, we're going to get started, and our first speaker is Stephanie Devaney, who is the program director of the President Obama's Precision Medicine Initiative, which he announced in the State of the Union last year, and the White House has been, and the NIH have been working on since then. But I'll let Stephanie give whatever other bio details you wish about yourself, and hopefully take it from there.
Great, thank you very much. So my name is Stephanie Devaney. I'm the project manager for the Precision Medicine Initiative at the White House. My background is actually in genomics, and I spent some time in a genomics lab and then have been doing science policy since then. Started at the National Institutes of Health, and while there, the president announced this initiative, and we on the NIH side worked to develop some of the research components of the initiative. And then I joined the White House to help coordinate the many agencies and activities that fall under this initiative. So essentially, the president's vision for this is that we have a really important opportunity right now with biomedical research, what we understand about health and disease, and electronic health records and other genotypes to take advantage of this and start to learn more about health and disease, and specifically, and I think importantly, about health and prevention and how we can all stay healthier. So in the State of the Union, he alluded to the initiative, and then he officially launched it at the end of January in a public event. And there's a number of different components, which I will briefly go over for you guys. There's a couple of scientific research components to the initiative, and then also some policy priorities that we have, and some other different aspects that I'd like to talk about briefly today. The Precision Medicine Initiative mission statement is pretty broad-reaching, but it helps us remember what it is that we're trying to do at the end of the day. So our mission statement is to enable a new era of medicine through research, technology, and policies that empower patients, researchers, and providers to work together towards development of individualized care. And that is a mission statement that I think a lot of organizations, researchers, and healthcare providers across the country ascribe to. And we are, very quick to acknowledge that precision medicine is not new, that this idea of treating individuals based on their individual characteristics is something that medicine has reached for a long time and is decades old, hundreds of years old. If you look at prescription glasses or blood donation, other examples where we have been trying to actually implement precision medicine in medical care. However, we have a situation where we have a number of diseases and conditions where there really are no effective treatments. So, and at the same time, we have a really important opportunity right now. We have the ability to sequence a genome in a day for $1,500. We have other omics technologies that are available and are evolving pretty rapidly. We have high compute capabilities today where we can store data, analyze data, mine data at scales that were not possible even 5-10 years ago. We have electronic health records being implemented across the country. Almost 90% of all providers now have electronic health records on patients, and there's a lot of information captured there on individuals' health. And most importantly, I think right now there is a real movement out there amongst patients and participants to actually be partners in research and to not be human subjects, but to be research participants. And so with that in mind, one of the central tenets of the Precision Medicine Initiative is that participants should be engaged and should be partners and should be involved in the governance and decision-making about some of the studies that we're proposing. So I'll briefly walk through the different components that have been put forward as part of this initiative, and just keep in mind that we are still building the initiative, so we're trying to do this with a lot of stakeholder engagement and activities, but it is still largely in the process of design. There are a couple science priorities that the President put forward and has put forward in his proposed FY16 budget, which we hope to get this year. There's a cancer component, which is really about taking a lot of the success we've already seen in oncology, precision care, and expanding on it. So the National Cancer Institute conducts a lot of clinical trials where they're looking at the mutations that drive a cancer as opposed to the tissue where the cancer originated, and trying to treat cancer based on the underlying genomic defect as opposed to where the tissue of origin. And they've seen a lot of success in that. And so the idea is to expand this to cancers where there really aren't effective treatments. And they're also going to be expanding into pediatric cancers, which is really important. And there's a proposal for, that's sort of shovel ready, and the National Cancer Institute is ready to move forward with those plans and expand on the success they've already seen. Then there's the other side of the house where we're really trying to design a research study that will allow us to take some of the success they've seen in cancer and apply it to other diseases. And that's this large national research cohort, which you may or may not have heard of, which is planned to be 1 million or more Americans who volunteer to donate data about themselves into a study that would then allow researchers to access these data with biological questions and learn a lot about health and disease in real time, longitudinally. So that component, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go on, but I'll just mention we also have a couple policy priorities. So we want to make sure that we have the right privacy and security safeguards in place for these data, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. I think that will be of interest to this group. And also the FDA has been working really hard to think about a new regulatory strategy for how to regulate technologies like genomics and others that are complex and rapidly evolving, and making sure that the tests, like genomic tests, if you're doing whole genome sequencing, how can you verify that that's accurate? And so patient safety, with patient safety in mind, while also being nimble to the evolution of this arena and making sure that we're not stifling innovation in those technologies. So FDA has been working really hard on that, and in fact have a couple workshops coming up in mid-November where they'll talk with the public about their plans. It's been really exciting to see that happen. So going back to the research cohort, there was a process over the summer. The National Institutes of Health would be launching this national research cohort of 1 million or more Americans. They ran a process over the summer with an expert working group of external experts, so the NIH managing the working group, but this was all external experts for the most part, who over a series of public workshops devoted to specific topics got a lot of public input and put together a report on what would be the optimal design for a study this large, and that would allow you to really learn the things that we want to learn about people's health and how we can treat disease better and emphasizing health. And that report came out in mid-September. It had a number of different recommendations in it. I would definitely recommend, if you're interested, going to NIH's website, and you can find the precision medicine page of the whole report is linked there. Has a nice executive summary as well. They really emphasized participants being at the center and being involved in the governance and understanding their rights and responsibilities as participants. They also emphasized the idea of giving information back to people, so people who participate in studies this big, being able to access information about themselves and about the studies that they're enrolled in at their preference, depending on how much or little someone might want to know. And they also talked a lot about how to reach underserved populations. So some of the folks who aren't connected to large research or large healthcare organizations, and how to make sure that they're able to volunteer to join this study if they wish to. They will be enrolling, once this cohort is stood up, they will be enrolling in 2 different ways: direct from individual, so if somebody off anywhere wants to enroll, they can enroll, and then also through collaboration with large healthcare networks like Kaiser or Geisinger or organizations like that who wish to partner. So none of that has been decided yet. And then those organizations would help to enroll people who are interested. And then the other thing that I would say they emphasized was strong data security and privacy and open access to researchers to use the data so that this resource is actually being broadly tapped. And then maybe I'll talk a little bit about, and we can get into any more details you want to in questions, but I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, what we're thinking about with data privacy and security. When the president made his, launched the initiative in January, he emphasized that we would incorporate privacy from the beginning and not lob it on after the fact. So as the working group, the ACD working group that the NIH pulled together was coming up with the recommendations on the design for this study, the White House pulled together an interagency group to think about what would be the principles that would govern privacy that could be flexible to changes in technologies over time, but would be sort of the principles under which you would pin implementation. And as part of that process, they pulled in a bunch of experts to a number of roundtables, combed the literature for other studies and organizations who thought about this, or other studies who have their own privacy policies, and looked at a lot of the privacy policies that are out there already, pulled together a set of principles and working in an interagency way. It was co-chaired by the White House, but also the Office for Civil Rights and National Institutes of Health. And then put together some principles which covered a number of topics, including governance and how participants can expect a study of this size to be governed, transparency, so making sure that everybody understands what it is exactly is happening with their data and specimens and how they're being used, respecting participant preferences, including how consent will be gotten, and then also individuals' rights to know more or less about themselves under the research studies, as well as withdrawing consent at any time. Participant empowerment through access to information. So that's the piece where we have heard loud and clear from the general public and various sectors of patient populations, et cetera, that people really want to learn something about themselves. So if they're really going to be involved in a study this big, they want to get some information back. And so we're emphasizing that and trying to understand with a little more granularity what exactly that means to people, and hoping to be able to offer some different levels of options for people who participate to say yes or no, they want to know this or they don't want to know that. And then data sharing, and so that participants understand how their data will be shared and accessed and used, and then data quality and integrity. So making sure that if somebody sees something wrong in their data, that they're able to report it and get it fixed. And so those policies, or those principles, went up for comments, public comment in July, and we got a number of comments back, which was nice, which is great, and we're in the process now of updating them, and the final will be posted in the coming weeks. At the same time, that group thought a lot about data security and realized that we actually really didn't have the right expertise around the table to think about security, which is a related but separate topic from privacy. And so we are running a very similar process on security to develop what we think will be the right data security framework, including a lot of the folks that were involved in the privacy principle development, so we have nice cohesion there, but making sure that we're also tapping into the right expertise, that the people who are really thinking about security at a time when data security is certainly not a guarantee. So, there will be some forthcoming, and in fact, we're holding a roundtable next week with external experts, so non-government folks. And so, if anyone here has recommendations on great data security minds, we'd love to include them in that. So let me know. And I think I will end there and ask if there's any questions, and maybe we can have more of a discussion.
I got one for you. There's been over the years lots of controversy over if someone's body is used for something, do they have ownership, do they have a financial interest in it? Where is the wind blowing on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and in fact, that has been something that bioethicists have been debating for quite some time. I mean, we would never say in the Precision Medicine Initiative that we own the data. In fact, we feel very compelled that their participants need to be included in the governance and understanding and making decisions on how that data is held, but also that somebody who is a participant in the study can withdraw their consent and pull their data back.
Even if a drug company is about to make a drug from their biologic material?
We have, in our principles, we have said, if somebody wants to withdraw consent, they have to understand that data that is currently in use or is aggregated cannot be withdrawn. So when they first sign the consent, they're agreeing to include their data, and at any time they can withdraw that, but we can't disentangle it from studies that are ongoing.
As you may know, the United Kingdom has had some quite contentious discussions about this very sort of topic. The government was proposing a program called Care.Data, where they were going to, the idea was to open up decades of national health patient data to researchers, and then it came out that they were also planning to sell them to third parties, and the whole thing has been wildly delayed. But there are a couple of questions that keep coming up in the UK, and one of them is about mission creep. How do you resist? How do you teach somebody in a data center somewhere to resist when police come along and say, we just like the list of everybody who's been through, that your data shows has been through drug treatments. And if, in terms of recommending experts, I strongly recommend you look up Ross Anderson at the University of Cambridge, who has done enormous amounts of work on this over the last decades.
Great, thank you for that. So to address the first part of your question about compelled disclosure, at least in terms, we have some protections there. I'm not sure that we have exactly the right protections, and we have, at the same time that we've been running this process to develop the privacy principles and to design the framework for what this study will look like ultimately, we have also been looking across the various policies that we have and looking for any gaps, including in the privacy area. And one of those that we've talked a lot about is compelled disclosure. So the National Institutes of Health has certificates of confidentiality, which essentially is a authorization to a researcher who's been awarded public money to do research, to deny any forced disclosure of the data that he or she holds. The certificates of confidentiality are optional, so a researcher has to ask for one. Under PMI, certificates of confidentiality will be used, so that will be sort of a policy decision that the PMI cohort will make. But in general, when we're looking out across federally funded researchers, they have a choice to ask for one or not. And the certificate of confidentiality in its current form, while strong and empowers the researcher, it also does not require them to withhold that data from compelled disclosure, so they can choose to hand it over or something. I know the National Institute, the Department of Justice, I think that's who it is, has a similar, I think they call them privacy certificates. I'd have to look this up, and I'm afraid I don't have all of the details, but I do know that they have a stronger model where you're actually, as a researcher, you're actually not allowed to hand over any data you're doing or you're holding under compelled disclosure. So we're looking at options for strengthening, but I do know that at a very minimum, PMI will protect against compelled disclosure as best we can.
So have you moved towards actually putting pen to paper and coming up with the consent form that participants will sign and what that looks like exactly? Just how broad and open-ended is the consent that participants will be asked to sign?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, emphasize that the consent in PMI should not be a one-time interaction, that there should actually be it should be more of an ongoing interaction. I think, a consent form tends to be a single point of contact with the participant, and we're thinking of it more as like a dynamic conversation over the years, with opportunities to change their preferences under the consent. However, of course, there will be a consent document that folks will sign up front in some form. The components of that document have not been written yet. We don't have people enrolling into the program or anything like that, and we don't have the IRB stood up. So all of that is still forthcoming. The report only came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I do envision that there will be somewhat of a broad consent, but the idea is that participants can come back and revisit and change their preferences over time. As you may know, the Office for Human Research Protections just put out a proposed rule for the revisions to the Common Rule. And in the proposal, so this is still a proposed rule at this point, I think the comment period is open until December 2nd, and this is all about, the Common Rule is all about how we protect research participants when they volunteer for research. In that proposed rule, they are now allowing use of a broad consent document for data and specimens. So in the past, what is currently the case now, the status quo right now, is that if you are a researcher and you have a specimen in your freezer, you can use it for research as long as the name has been stripped off without consent from the participants. In this proposed rule, the federal government is now proposing that you must have consent to use specimens for secondary research studies down the road. So I am a researcher and I take a sample and I use it on my study that I've asked you for your consent for, and I freeze it. Today, under the current rules, I can then go back and for a future study, take the name off of it and use that sample in a de-identified way. The proposal that's out now through OHRP acknowledges that de-identification is not really a real thing anymore, and so a specimen can be re-identified quickly and easily these days, and so that people should at least understand that they have a choice on whether their specimen will be used secondarily for research in their data as well. And so I think that's a really important advance. There's also the other side of the debate, which says, I think where people argue that broad consent is not really informed consent, or it can't be informed because by nature it's broad and open-ended. I personally feel like it's an advance from today where we're using people's samples without their understanding. So we'll see where that lands. That's still a proposed rule, so we'll see where that lands. But those are the regulations that would govern. But PMI will use a consent that will be open-ended and will be asking for broad consent, but will be very interactive with their participants. The plan.
Have you had any thoughts about interacting? You say the kind of information that people will get back might be awfully technical, might be some very high-end data analysis, copyrighted papers not available freely and not easily understandable. With a big mismatch between probabilities, the same kind of discussion that people went through about whether gene tests should be available on the open market. So what kind of discussions and thoughts, not very far along yet?
No, it's a great question. We have actually talked about it quite a bit, and I know the working group that put out this report in mid-September thought about it quite a bit. They recommended that as part of the governance that will ultimately make a lot of these decisions that will involve a lot of participants and patients, that they take on, that there be a sub-governance structure that think about how and what types of data be returned to people and how they're returned. And there are regulatory and state laws that we need to make sure that we abide by, including CLIA, the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment Act, and HIPAA, which both govern what types of information you can and should give back to people. So those will be taken into account. But then there is this question about how you make things available to people in a way that's digestible and that they understand. So I expect that a lot of that conversation will happen over the coming months. I will say that we want to bias towards sharing more information as we can under the law with people as they want it, but we really want it to be preference. We don't want to give people information back that they don't want. So while we've done a lot of thinking on that, we have not made any concrete decisions about how to support some of that information. In terms of publications and copyright, we will be encouraging that at least aggregate findings like that be returned to people. So that's a pretty low lift thing where if a researcher makes a discovery using data from this large cohort, that the people who had contributed data should be able to have access to that publication.
Yeah.
That doesn't get at the question of the translation of it, because some of them can be pretty technical.
But understanding is different. Jim Watson had his entire genome sequence, but there was only a small piece that related to his probability. He thought at the time of whether or not he would get Alzheimer's. And he said, just mask that little piece for me, please. But then he said, you may have seen him, he said, well, unfortunately, I didn't ask them to mask enough. I should have asked them to mask another 100 base pairs. So, yeah, I was able to find out what I didn't want to know. But we didn't know that at the time. That didn't come out until a few months later. So there's always those kinds of questions. Interesting.
Yeah.
So if I decide to participate in it, and my genetic code is part of the cohort and is put in the database, then the database is made pretty much accessible to any researcher, because I know you guys are emphasizing sort of the open source nature of it, so that not just professional academic hardcore researchers can access it, but it can be a million eyeballs looking at it, and that will have lots of advantages for research. And so presumably my DNA would be de-identified or remove my name, but other than that, basically it's going to be out there for anybody to look at, right? And sort of analyze in any way that they want.
So the idea on how the data will be managed right now, and again, I'm saying a lot of this without actual implementation. A lot of the implementation details have not been laid down yet. But the idea is, and this was recommended in the report, there's actually quite a bit of detail in the report on how a program like this could and should be designed. There's a lot of thinking that went behind this. So the idea is that there will be different layers of data available at, sort of like at a funnel effect, from broadly available down to very controlled access. I would imagine that genomic data would fall closer to the bottom, where you actually, as a researcher, would have to apply for access to those data. And it would not just be out there for anybody to get on their smartphone and click through.
What kind of data would be the broadest level that high school students, for example, look at?
Yeah, you can imagine a scenario where we would have aggregate data, like census type data, that would be broadly open to folks. But we haven't really gotten down to what exactly those types of data would be at this point. But I would think that would be the type of data. It would be aggregate level data in the same way that the census manages it, where you can have access to aggregate data, but not individual level data of a single person. Here is Jay's DNA and his EHR and his mobile device data.
And then for the researchers who do get access to those detailed data, they agree not to make attempts or with the most detailed actually identifying, or would even that be attempted to be identified?
Yeah, I'm certain the data would be de-identified.
Well, there might be certain applications where they want to follow up with me, or
yeah, but so a participant who joins PMI will have the ability to say, please do recontact me or don't recontact me for additional studies. And so if you don't want to be recontacted, you just won't. And then communications will happen at the governance level, not from individual researchers, I imagine.
So if a researcher discovers something in my DNA that I've previously indicated that I want to hear about such things, then the researcher will tell me that it will be filtered through the governance structure. They will inform me that I have this killer deal in my DNA or what have you.
It's a good question. NIH needs to, now that they've got the design report, they need to come up with all of those implementation details at this point, and the governance that's going to be helping to set some of those rules, because the return of it, I don't know exactly how the communications are going to happen from the governance to the individuals.
Sorry,
And the IRB hasn't been established, and they'll have to look at all of that and the protocol and the consent and all of that before anyone is enrolled.
But so the vision is if a researcher is looking at my most detailed health information, including my genetic code that's been de-identified, they agree not to make efforts to de-identify it.
To re-identify it.
Re-identify it,
Right.
sorry, yeah. And then, I mean, I don't know, that seems like it would be difficult to enforce for all the same reasons that, privacy invasions are often so often visible and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then, I guess, what's your thinking around that, or what's the thinking around that, and what kind of, would it just be barred from further research using it, or what would the punishment be? Do you need law passed in order to give it teeth? So, talk about that.
Yeah, we've thought a lot about that because, of course, re-identification is really hard to enforce. Somebody who broke any of the agreement that they made with the governance on access to the data would no longer have access to those data. That's sort of the easy thing, and that can be governed by PMI. But when we're looking at national policy, we've thought a lot about where there might be gaps in our national policy on this. So I think we need to think about that quite a bit before we launch the cohort. But this has been an issue with research. We've been thinking about this for a decade now. As the genome becomes more widely available and genomic data becomes more easily accessible and people are combining it, this has been one of the fundamental questions is how do we prohibit re-identification of individuals? I think one thing that's really important that we can do is when somebody is agreeing to participate, that we make it very clear to them that there are risks. And a lot of the risks with something like this are informational and not interventional, like you would be undergoing if you're in a clinical trial. This is really informational risks, and trying to be as transparent as we can about what those informational risks are.
I would say we're actually kind of a bit over time, but if there's one more question, we could probably go a little long on this, and then we'll go until about 3:25 or 3:30.
So you've got 1 million genomes. Who has access to the data, i.e. can a researcher, a member of the public, do research, say, on the population frequency of a specific gene? For instance, a patient group wants to know what the frequency is in their favorite gene. Would they have access to that?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that specific question, but the idea is there could you look at the allelic frequency of
It
mutation
takes some
X?
doing to get put together a research project. You need $1 million, right? Whereas if I go to the 1,000 Genomes project, I can probably actually browse the genes now. On the other hand, if I had access to the genes and I also had my 23andMe results for $99, I could identify my full genome pattern easily. If I had brief access to the full data.
I guess I'm wary to commit to anything because we just haven't worked out what the different data tiers and access will be at this point. But I could imagine a scenario where aggregate data like that might be available to different people. But at a broader level, then you must sign this agreement. And
I've thought about a few of these things because I was thrown out of the Lindsay conference study during the screening, and I don't know exactly why. Perhaps because I had a master's in computer science and had previous genetics tests and said I'd be interested in seeing my data.
Huh.
Great. So thanks so much for coming. Dr. Tom Keenan is our next speaker. He's a professor of environmental design and computer science at the University of Calgary. He taught Canada's first computer crime course and was involved in drafting that country's inaugural computer crime legislation. Dr. Keenan is the author of over 500 academic papers, book chapters, presentations, and articles, and has spoken on 5 continents to academic audiences, major conferences, and the general public. His latest book, Techno-Creep, the sex tech technology, is becoming creepy in hidden ways that are difficult for most people to understand.
Well, thank you, and I'm so happy to be here. CFP has a very sweet spot in my heart because I met my wife at it 12 years ago. She had nothing to do with computers. She was from the health field. She now knows a lot more about computers. I know a lot more about health. And hi, if you're watching out there on the stream. I know the streaming of this is a real positive thing because I watched the previous session up in my hotel room. It's perfect that you're here, because I just can tell you two things that relate to this. And really, what Stephanie is talking about is why I wrote the book and why I give talks like this. Many people, I won't ask if you did it, gave sperm donations to put themselves through college. And there was no question that was anonymous. It said right there, these are anonymous donations. There was a well-documented case in science of a young man who found his birth father, sperm donor father, even though the father had never been genetically tested. You know, he used his own DNA results. He used some other circumstantial information, like he had once been told, well, your dad went to such and such a college, and he went and, basically said, Dad, it's time for college tuition. So things change. There are unintended consequences, and that's really the point. If you want a more specific example, go to findcraig.org, I think it is. Craig Ventnor, a venture capitalist, has posted his full DNA sequence as best he has it. And you can find out, for example, his most likely surname, because the particular genetic makeup in his DNA is most frequent in Cornwall, England, and the most common name in that little part of England is Ventnor. So my point is that there are deductions that can be made. So that was just a little preamble. I want to talk to you mainly about biometrics. We all know, I'm going to skip a lot of this, but passwords are severely broken. When people are making jokes about passwords, like, well, they told me I needed 7 characters in a capital, so I got Sacramento and the 7 dwarfs, that type of thing. Convenience is king. So many people love their iPhone. They put their finger down on it, and it's perfect. And biometrics technology is getting better. When I worked in the 20 years ago, we had high false acceptance rates, type 1, type 2 errors. The other thing is it's less invasive than most people think. So you don't actually go out there and lose your fingerprint when you put it on your iPhone. They make a hash of it, they measure certain points, and they make a number out of your fingerprint. So they haven't really stolen your soul, they've stolen your number. There are also legal forces pushing for a non-repudiatable ID. Unless they've changed it, as of October 1st in the US, if a merchant does not have a PIN, chip and PIN, then if there's fraud, they're liable for the fraud amount on a credit card. We already have this in Canada. So the reality is that there are lots of reasons why we want to identify people. Biometrics are going to creep people out. It's so you can't change your fingerprint. You can't change, without major surgery, your hand geometry or your retinal scan. Snowden's revelations about government tracking made us all nervous. Then there were articles like the famous one, who knows, Target knows teen is pregnant before her dad read. You all know that one. That's actually a bit of a sketchy story. It's not quite true. However, there are now algorithms that predict the likelihood that you will become divorced, the likelihood that you will switch insurance companies. In fact, the U.S. insurance company was caught adjusting the premiums not based upon how risky you are, how much chance there is that you're going to have an accident, but if you're really, really marginal and no other company will want you, they were jacking up your premiums so that, they knew they had you. Whereas another guy who has a choice of 5 different companies, they couldn't raise his premium. So there's even the creditworthiness of your friends. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I personally am being pursued by several things right now. I looked online for a 24-inch wall oven. Now whenever I go to a Facebook or travel site, that wall oven from Sears Canada says, buy me, buy me. Hotwire wants to sell me a rental car, but look at this. They want to sell me a rental car to be picked up on February 4th in Vancouver, BC. My travel plans are being interchanged. And I can tell you how. There are systems like FBX, Facebook Exchange, and you are sold in a real-time auction. Even my own book is chasing me. What's coming down the line is going to be even more interesting. Mondelez, a company no one's heard of, but you've heard of their products, Chips Ahoy cookies, Oreo cookies. They're about to bring out smart shelves that as you walk by will measure your body mass index, determine your gender, estimate your approximate age, and possibly give you a coupon on your smartphone or on the shelf. So the whole shopping technology area is going to be based on some biometric factors. In fact, one of the weirdest ones that was tested out in Australia, there's an invention from MIT called audio spotlight. It's like a laser beam of sound. When you stand under it, you hear things. In this particular grocery store, if you stood on that spot, you heard, hello, you can hear me. No one else can. I'm the voice of your conscience. Do you see those bananas in front of you? They're fair trade bananas. They cost a little more, but you know what you should do. And sales of those bananas went up 152%. Some people weren't running out the store because they were schizophrenic and now, they were really hearing voices. But this type of technology is coming. It's not far away. Several California malls have been caught tracking people through the store, through the mall by their cell phone pings. What store did you go into? What did you pick up? And so on. So, people are rightly sketchy about this. And we have all these different things. I won't hit all of them. Well, my favorite is where you use Wi-Fi. I was at Black Hat Asia in Singapore. This guy picks up a phone from a guy in the audience with his permission and says, oh, Royal Bank of Scotland employees. Like, well, now I know where you work. British Airways First Class Lounge. Ah, you're a high roller. And then he paused for dramatic effect and said, I didn't know they had Wi-Fi at Hooters. So the fact is that your phone's Wi-Fi is leaving a trail. If you don't clear it, it knows that I was in this hotel. It knows that I was in an Air Canada lounge. It knows everywhere I've been. And those type of things aren't known by most people. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because there are all these things happening that people are blissfully unaware of. Now to get to the ID specifics, you can already buy for $9.99 a digital ink tattoo, and apparently it's a very trendy thing to do in some social groups, that you point your phone at it and that then logs you on. So that takes the place of your password. So technology is already getting on our skin. This is a pretty amazing one. It is actually a tattoo that is also a microphone. So this thing is patented technology. Nokia invented a cell phone that will be your arm. So it's not like the wrist phone anymore. It's like your wrist is the phone. And just to prove it's patented, there's a US patent number for coupling an electronic skin tattoo to a mobile communication device. So your body is going to become the technology. They will be unified. I have a great friend, Steve Mann from the University of Toronto, has bad eyesight, so he has electronic eyeglasses. And he's also an American, so he went to register his child's birth at the US Embassy in Ottawa. And they said, what's that on your face? He said, oh, I'm a cyborg. I have this extra technology to help me see. And they said, do you see that bench over there? He said, yeah. Well, that's the waiting bench for cyborgs until they take off their extra technology, right? So, the reality is, even the US Embassy is aware of that. One of the creepiest ones, Regina Dugan, who also has a magnetic ink tattoo. She used to head research at DARPA. She's now with Google, as far as I know. She is handing over a password pill. And the idea is that every day you would take a pill, it would pass through your digestive tract, emitting radio waves, and that would log you on all the computer systems you needed to be logged onto. Dumbest idea ever. It turns stealing your password for tomorrow into going into your desk drawer and pulling out the next day's pill. It's totally ridiculous. Plus, I think it's a little creepy. I don't think if my employer wanted to tattoo my password or make me take a pill, I would want to continue being employed there. So I do this research, which led to TechnoCreep, with these premises that there are these wheels within wheels. So when you're being served up an ad on Facebook for a Rolex watch you looked at 10 minutes ago on eBay, most people don't know how that happens. Most people can't even understand how it happens. There are definitely creepy people out there, we know that, and the laws and regulations are lagging. So those are my key premises. I won't spend any time on this, but I actually, as a good academic, wrote a creep theory chapter, and I came up with different dimensions and tested it against different real-world applications. And some other time we can talk about that. But I want to talk a little about behavioral biometrics. Do any of you have the progressive snapshot? This is the thing that tracks your driving, and I write about it in TechnoCreep. I think it's pretty benign. It doesn't know where you're driving. It knows how much you drive. It's really usage-based insurance. It knows what time you drive, because if it's between midnight and 6 a.m., even if you're not drunk or stoned, everyone else on the road is, so it's dangerous, and your rate should go up. And it knows how hard you hit the brake. So I said in the book, I wrote the book a year ago, I said, this thing's pretty benign because you might get a discount on your insurance. If you want to put this under your dashboard in your OBDI2 port, go ahead and do it. Well, immediately, Allstate and Desjardins of Canada came out with a much creepier application. They said, look, we don't need to plug this thing into your dashboard. That's stupid. You're always carrying your cell phone anyway. We'll track your driving based on your cell phone. And by the way, we know where you are from the GPS, so we will also note if you're within 10 kilometers of the speed limit. So they track where you drive, how far you drive, your braking acceleration, time and speed, and posted speed limit compliance. Claim they will never sell the information, although it's subject to subpoena. The weirdest part is they made a game out of it. Even if you are not a Desjardins customer, you can download the DriveWise app, and they urge you to challenge your friends, challenge your spouse. Who's the better driver? All this time you are giving detailed information of every way you went. They say you might save up to 40% on your insurance. The actual number is usually about 8%. So if you save anything, it's going to be, less than 10%. So, that's pretty creepy, and it's kind of taking something that is almost part of our body, namely our smartphones that we never leave. Almost every young person keeps their phone within reach, for sure, even when they sleep. And here's where it got even better. John Hancock Insurance says, look, we'll put the tracker right on you. If you agree to wear a fitness monitor 24/7 and you work out a lot, we're going to give you a discount on your life insurance. Now, there is, of course, the possibility you'll be on the treadmill for 8 hours and have a heart attack and die, but it's just a really kind of creepy tracking thing. Fitness monitors are part of that body as information system. Here's one that talks about body odor, identifying people. Some people in Spain have an 85% accuracy rate. You probably thought your cubicle mate smelled funny. Well, they now know how to quantify that and actually how to identify people. They're proposing that. A company in Toronto called NIMI has determined that our heart rhythm is unique enough that, in fact, they could identify us through a heart rhythm. So there's a very real possibility of, your heartbeat being your password. If not your heartbeat, then your EEG. A number of companies are using these consumer-grade EEGs like NeuroSky and Emotive and Muse to gather data on your brainwaves so you'll think your password. So all this is coming down the line, and not 10 years from now, more like 10 months. I did a proof of concept funded by the government of Canada on typing rhythm in the 1980s to see if we could use that as a password. And it's interesting, what I found was that I could tell if you were sitting at the computer and you got up and he sat down, it would be different enough. I couldn't actually really identify you. Since then, a number of researchers have pushed it so they have pretty good ones, but it has the seeds of its own demise. We tell people to have long passwords. The longer your password is, the harder it is to type repeatedly. So in fact, this method kind of contradicts good security advice. I want to tell you a little story that I discovered. Canada has these wonderful automated entry things. If you're a trusted traveler, you walk up to a Nexus kiosk and you don't have to pull any card out, or you didn't have to pull your card out. You're supposed to have the card with you, but it identified you by your retina. Now here's the computer science part of it. Doing that is a hard computer science problem. It has to look you up in a database against all the other registered users. It's a lot easier to do what the US does, which is have you put in your passport, put in your fingerprints, and validate that you're the holder of that passport. That's a simpler problem. Canada decided to be bold. And I was sitting at a dinner with the guys who developed this in Ottawa, and I said, you guys did a really great thing. And they said, shut up. I said, wait a minute. No, just shut up. The minister's over there. Shut up. We'll tell you out in the hall. So I went out in the hall and I said, what's the big secret? They said, well, you think it works, right? I said, yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't always get a unique match. So sometimes it'll match the eyeballs to several different people. And there's an error going on there. So finally I said, what do you do with that? And I had to almost make a freedom of information request to get the answer out of them. They finally fessed up. If they couldn't uniquely identify you, you got that funny little receipt that said, go see a human being. And then they checked your passport. The best part of this, and these things cost millions and millions of dollars, is that I recently found them for sale on the Government of Canada surplus site. So if you would like your own Nexus terminal, the winning bid was $155.01. And they're mainly being sold, to be cannibalized by the computers. And so now they have new kiosks, and guess what? The new one, you have to put your card in, right? So we have dumbed down to the same system as the U.S. Your fuel band, if you wear one, does indeed know that you're having sex, okay? If it is the middle of the night, let's say 2 in the morning, and you just burned 150 calories, if you're a typical male, and you took 0 steps, it can make a deduction. It can also communicate. It might talk by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. It might even contact the person you're supposed to be in bed with. The point is that all of this body data is being generated and going who knows where. And the answer is, in this case, it could be going to somebody you don't want to have it. There are serious workplace issues. Companies are actually giving their employees fitness monitors. 4 out of 5 employees in one survey said they would wear a company-provided fitness monitor if they got some perk, like extra vacation days or something. But, I always think of this scenario, and it takes a little while to load this next picture, that you're in a delicate negotiation with your boss. And she is sitting, staring into your eyes, except under the table, there's a little screen that displays your heart rate, your perspiration, and so on. So even in business situations, your voice stress, all kinds of other biometric parameters could be used for nefarious purposes. Other concerns? Well, if you have a fitness tracker on all the time, they know how much you slept. Now, if you come into work and you're a United Airlines pilot and you were doing the other thing as opposed to sleeping in bed all night, maybe you shouldn't fly the plane. If you're a clerk at Walmart, maybe you'd be just fine even if you had 1 hour sleep. So should the employer be able to see that data? We know that Google's making a smart contact lens for diabetes. Maybe it could also be a drug testing contact lens, not that far away. Genetic information, of course, may reveal health risks not just about you, but also your relatives. So if anybody in your family, and of course you realize this, has identified their DNA with their name, that says things about all the other members of the family who are genetically related. And the other thing is biometrics could become de facto mandatory. So I read about in a book a company called Lendo that's in the UK that sets your loan rate based on your friends. What happens is you say, I want a loan, they say there'll be 38% interest. They go, oh, no, it's too much. Well, okay, give us access to your Facebook profile. Now, if all your Facebook friends are homeless people, it'll still be 38%. But if you have quality friends by their definition, which is other Lendo customers who have paid back their loans, that will actually reduce your interest rate. But they reserve the right, if you don't pay them back, to shame you on Facebook in front of your friends. Okay, bioinformation can be stolen, that's certainly a risk. Any data can be stolen, we know that, OPM and so on. So here's an example of a sort of fake USB charger that records all your keystrokes in the air. The security of this information is definitely going to be a serious concern. Have any of you got the Amazon Echo yet? Okay, what do you think of it?
It's all right.
Is it spying on you?
No,
How do you know?
because it only activates when you use a whisper.
Okay, you have to say the word Alexa, right? So you go, Alexa. For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, this is like Siri, but it sits on the table, and you can do things like, Alexa, and it goes, yes. What year did the American Civil War end? And it will tell you the answer. So it's great for settling disputes and so on. Okay, I once posed a question to Sir Tim Berners-Lee, do you allow the internet on your dinner table? And he said, only to settle questions like, what year did the Civil War end? So questions of fact and breaking up disputes, yes, otherwise no checking email. Well, this thing, of course, to know that you're saying Alexa has to listen to you all the time. And there has been at least one article that suggests if a government agency wanted to bug every home in America but didn't have the budget, they could just get you to buy this for $99 yourself, ship it into your house and wire it up. So the point is that it is listening. And one of the reasons I bring it up here is your voice print has been proposed. Air Canada now is using that to identify you on the frequent flyer program. Say your Aeroplan number, and they check your voice print against the reference one. So if I wanted your voice print, I'd probably get it through your Echo, or I would get it through your child. This is the newest Barbie, the Mattel Talk to Me Barbie, and here's how this works. Your child talks to Barbie. All the information is sent by Wi-Fi to a server in Los Angeles that does deep-level semantic analysis and comes back with an answer. So in the demo they showed me, the child said, "Barbie, what should I be when I grow up?" And Barbie said, "You've told me that you like to be on stage and that you like to talk. So you should be a dancer or a politician or a dancing politician." So we have a lot of those in Canada now. So anyway, this information is being sent who knows where, and who knows what's being done with it. So your children may be the vulnerability. I want to sort of wrap up by telling you that in all my travels, I found the creepiest place in America was any Disney theme park, notably Disney World in Orlando. They now put a wristband on you, an RFID wristband, and it's the kind that has long range. So they know everywhere that you've gone. They know every time that you went to the bathroom, speaking of biodata. They know how long you were in the bathroom. They know which bathroom you went into. They know what meals you ate. So the reality is this tracking technology is something we put on voluntarily. However, you can still go to Disney and say, "I'm going to pay $83 or whatever, but I don't want one of those things. I want a paper ticket." Yes, sir, here's your paper ticket. It gets you into the park. But that's all that it does. This thing allows you to jump the line 3 times a day. This thing allows you some other privileges. This thing keeps money on it. Even little children have spending limits. And the characters are able to see the child coming, on a little tablet. Sally is approaching. Her favorite character is Minnie Mouse, and Minnie Mouse is looking at this. Her remaining spending limit for today is $32, right? So out comes the $29.99 Minnie Mouse doll. So the point is that if you opt not to have this, you lose all your special privileges. You become just an ordinary, I can go through the gate person. And, imagine telling your child, "Well, that family over there, they're going right on Thunder Mountain, but we're going to stand in the sun for 25 minutes because we value our privacy." That's not going to wash. So I always like to end with this pre-internet cartoon, Free to Good Home, beautiful 6-month-old male kitten or handsome 32-year-old husband. Funny, good job, doesn't like cats, says he goes or the cat goes. Call Jennifer and see both and decide which one you like. Why do I show you this? I want you to remember that everything we do involves choices. Okay, if you decide to use 23andMe, that's fine. I've used 23andMe. My dog has a complete file there. I even did the follow-up survey on behalf of my dog and indicated although he's male, he's pregnant and has gestational diabetes. So the last point I would give you is that I have a whole chapter here called Anti-Creep in which I talk about ways to give disinformation. So my 23andMe file is pretty funny, largely because it's in my dog's name and everything that I've told him is fictitious. So data quality might be an issue for you guys too. And that's my talk, but I'm happy to have a little time for Q&A if we have it. Thank you. On anything. Yes, go.
So, you have a really fascinating list of different biometric ID profiles, but really in the end, there's only so many types of different biometric IDs that you can use conveniently instead of a password. So I'm curious if you think that maybe there's a chance that, say we go down this route of biometrics like they seem like we're going to, but
yeah,
kind of one of the most common refrains for a password is don't use the same password in 2 places, because
yes,
one entity gets compromised, then all your entities that use that password are compromised. I wonder,
your fingerprint is the same everywhere, right?
Is there a chance that maybe we go down the biometric path in 5 or so years, after a few data breaches,
yep,
suddenly the entire method is just worthless because hackers already have access to any type of commonly used biometric for
right. There's a technological answer that you can actually change your fingerprints because they could change the algorithm by which they measure it, right? So since they're not actually capturing your full fingerprint, they could measure different whorls and so on. There's a fun answer to this question too, which is that my wife is Australian and therefore has to go through a US visit enrollment every time she comes into the United States. And this consists of putting down your 2 index fingers and looking into a camera. And as she was going through in Vancouver once, she had a Band-Aid on her index finger. And so the clerk said, take that off. And she said, well, it might bleed. Oh, don't bleed on my equipment, right? So what should I do? And the woman said, give me another finger. And being Australian, carrying one like this. And is that okay? And the woman behind the desk said, as long as you give us this same finger when you leave the United States of America. But that was the problem. For the next 10 times she entered the U.S., she was enrolled with the wrong finger. And so she would be set to sit under the portrait of George Bush and get a secondary interrogation until the moving average caught up. So, I mean, eventually things do kind of correct and rationalize there. But the direct answer to your question is if the whole fingerprint database was compromised, we'd have to just use a different algorithm probably, I think. But that's a guess.
Well, let's see, OMB said, how many people have lost their fingerprint data, so that may be happening.
It just might be happening right now, yeah. I haven't looked into what, the level of detail that they captured there. There's a company called Photon X that claims they can read your fingerprints at 2 meters. Okay, they do mainly military work, and they can pick your fingerprints up as you walk by. I'll give you one more. I have a theory that soon we're going to walk into Target, Walmart, whatever, and as you use the keypad, because there'll still be keypads, you of course leave a few skin cells on it. There's a technology called touch DNA, and the next time you come into that Walmart and you use the keypad, it's going to go, I recognize you. Oh, you're pre-diabetic. We analyzed your DNA from the last time, and here's a 20% off coupon on our diabetes medicine, or whatever you have, whatever you need. There's nothing, to my knowledge, in most legal systems that would prevent that. We may need to be thinking about that sooner than we think.
The movie Gattaca.
Yeah.
The movie Gattaca.
Yeah. Are we done? Oh, yes, please.
You focus a lot on identification and tracking for obvious reasons, but you also sort of started discussing remote biosensing that could be used as like a lie detector, that sort of thing. Have you seen any of these examples?
Yeah, the Israelis have voice stress analysis that they apply, and they can do it over the telephone. There is a lot of work, and I wrote a bit about it in the book, on fMRI lie detectors. Okay, so the idea is that they will show a terrorist, and the military knows much more about this than I do, but they'll show a terrorist a cave somewhere, and they'll be able to tell if there's a recognition going on, that type of stuff. Right now, it's kind of junk science in a lot of ways, so there actually was a letter in the New York Times. It was kind of topical. In the last Hillary Clinton incarnation, there was a piece in the New York Times that she activated the disgust center in 82% of women. And these Nobel Prize winners took the time to write a letter to the editor saying there is no such thing as the disgust center. This is total junk science, and you shouldn't be using fMRIs to do this type of stuff. There have been a couple of court cases, actually, where fMRI evidence has been admitted in death penalty cases, because in the death penalty, anything is admissible, apparently, because if there's any hope that it will do the defendant any good. So there is a Dr. Daniel Amen, who has frequently testified in cases showing that this person doesn't have the mental capacity to form the mens rea to do that crime, that type of thing. So yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that, definitely coming. Good question.
Anything else? Awesome. I think the other panels are ongoing, so.
Great. I will hang around if you guys want to talk, and books on Amazon. Thank you very much. Can I sign your book to you?
Yeah. Thank you for.
Good pleasure.
Pleasure to see you, Tom. I work at the NIH.
Oh, yeah?
In the library. I'm an informationist.
So the reason I don't freak out about the echo and my own roommate be like joke when I got it, but it was one of my fantasy surveillance charges because I work on surveillance reform. Is that to me it's no different than your phone. I mean, people out there, law enforcement has been remotely owning it, using phones. So